I'm fired up, let me tell you. I wanted to come on here. I was just listening to one of my mentors on the YouTube, and it just reminded me of my experience. Okay, so I wanted to share. So if you don't know, I identify as what has been called in the teachings that I study under the Ascended Masters, this concept and this term called an avatar. And to explain a little bit more about that in layman's terms, I have my whole life identified with being what our culture has called, back then it was the indigo children or rainbow children or crystal children or star seeds, I think now is what people call them. I don't know, I kind of stopped paying attention a couple years ago, but I very much identified with that growing up throughout my life, and feeling, before I even knew what those terms were, I felt this deep connection to something greater than me. And growing up in the Southeast United States, I was told or understood that to be God. But I always had this sense that it wasn't one being. It was one being full of many beings. And it was just a flow. It was just a sense. It was just a flow, right? And I felt like I was connected and a part of that flow and was here as an expression of that connection and that energy and that sense of oneness. And going throughout my life, I experienced a lot of different things to learn from and to experience on earth. Hello, I'm a human after all, in this form. And I came upon these teachings from the Ascended Masters. And through these teachings, I've been able to understand more of my own psychology. I've been able to resolve a lot of my own inner psychology to an incredible degree, and feel like I am here to share my experience from a more balanced state than I was. If you look at my catalog here on my YouTube channel, I have been sharing myself for the past 11 years. And long before I knew the Ascended Master teachings, but I always felt this desire and duty to share my experience and my experience of my experience, and how I was interpreting my life and my reality and my consciousness in a way that has always been very natural to do, which was usually through my whatever laptop I had at the time's webcam, and with the advancement with technology, through my iPhone camera, which I am speaking to you on right now. So that's not the point of this video. What my mentor was sharing was in regards to this feeling of being abandoned by God, right? And I had this feeling peak for me around 2023, almost like right before I found the teachings. And it was probably my lowest point. And I just felt pretty much around the time I had given birth to my son, for maybe about after that, starting sometime after that postpartum time, those creeping feelings started to happen. It was almost like I had hit a new level of my own reckoning that I could no longer ignore. because before having a child, I was still doing my best to resolve psychology, but it was a very conscious decision for me to have my son, but for very subconscious reasons. And I think my soul was ready for more, which is why it was like a compulsion for me to want to have my son. And the unraveling of my psychology that has happened since then is something that I am so like deeply grateful for. Like, wow. Thank you. Thank you to my son for agreeing to do that with me, to do this with me. That is so funny. The reason I think I'm feeling all this emotion around this is because, like, at the time I thought it was like the worst thing that had ever happened to me, like becoming a mom, because of how deeply challenging and feeling like I couldn't do it. You know, it had nothing to do with my son. He was perfect in his own being. It wasn't him. It was me, and what that role was commanding out of me, and all that I had to go through. And it just like, I just got beaten down. I just felt like so beaten down. And I just felt like for so long, like this deep resentment and upsetness at myself for the life that I was living. And so the emotion that I feel, to see that complete like 180 of like that genuinely being like the biggest blessing of my life, it's because of what has catalyzed from that, like the undeniable self-responsibility that one has to have when they become a parent. The mirror is just never going to go away unless you dip. I mean, people dip all the time, but then it's like a ghost that haunts them for the rest of their life. For some people, I don't know, because I don't know. I actually don't know what that experience would be like for that person. I can imagine it, but I've stayed. And so I'm going to try to remember what I was going to say. The whole point of this video, I wasn't anticipating this part. In order for, avatars, right? Beings that come from different worlds to, for whatever reason, had attained a certain higher level of consciousness on those planets, right? Where they naturally started working with Ascended Masters. And the Ascended Masters are the beings that have ascended to a certain level of consciousness, to the Ascended realm. And some of them have created our sphere. A part of me still doesn't understand certain aspects of that process, because I know Mother Mary, for example, ascended from Earth. But that doesn't mean she necessarily helped create the sphere, unless I'm mistaken. And if any of my fellow Ascended Master students watch my videos and know more about that, feel free to let me know in the comments or message me, because I'm pretty integrated into the community. You can just message me. But maybe for other people to understand, you can put it in the comments. So we start working with these beings, right? These teachers, these spiritual teachers. And we are presented with this planet called Earth, right? And we have attained a certain level of a higher level of spiritual awareness, consciousness. and decide to descend into matter to be a part of the raising of the planet, because a certain type of stagnation had occurred on the planet long time ago, before history, before written history. And because of that stagnation, the inhabitants of Earth basically called for diversification so things can get shaken up a little bit, and two types of beings were allowed to incarnate on the planet from that point on, which was the fallen beings and the avatars. So all of the great epics in our culture, darkness and light, right? Good and evil. But it's not black and white like that, but that's how a lot of the consciousness at the time had interpreted these forces, right? These beings, one with a malignant intent, one with a positive intent, benefic intent. And so avatars, when you descend into matter, you lose your sense of connection. And the whole point of this video was to talk about that piece, which is, in order to make a difference on this planet, we had to go into the actual level of matter that the inhabitants were at, start at the same starting point as them, right? Doesn't matter who we were before, right? We descend into matter at the 48th level of consciousness. Well, back then it was lower because the collective density was at a lower state of consciousness, but we're going to just talk right now. 48th level of consciousness. Whether you've been here before or not, here we are, 2025. The standard level to incarnate on planet Earth is the 40th level of consciousness. So everyone starts out the same. And the only way you can make a difference is starting out at the same level, to be an example, right? We came here to be an example that I incarnated here at the same level of consciousness as you, right? And I was able to walk myself up in consciousness. So I started out from a lower sense of a lower consciousness, right? A lower level of consciousness, and systematically, step by step, rose it higher. So that's when you hear about personal growth or spiritual growth, when you see people change in your life, they no longer hang out with the same friends, they no longer do the same activities. Like who I was 11 years ago, I was smoking weed still, probably. I just had a whole different lifestyle. I didn't just do that. I mean, I guess 11. Yeah, I was doing mushrooms. I was hanging out with people. I was probably drinking a little bit. I was in a really messed up toxic relationship, working at a bar where people smoked. That was like the outer manifestation, right? And then I just started making decisions to reflect more of like what felt true to me, because I kept getting internal signals and external signals that this isn't working. And so I made a change. I made a choice. I made a decision. And then I observed the consequences of that decision, which informed further choices. And that's how you grow. You make a choice, you get feedback from the matter realm, the material universe, the world around you, the environment, internally and externally. You decide, do I want more or less of that? And you make another choice, and you make another choice, and you make another choice. And it's just step by step by step, walking up the consciousness ladder, all the way up to the 144th level of consciousness until you ascend. And so I guess this is how this video is meant to go, because I thought it was going to go one way, and here it is now. So I just wanted to share that we all start where we start, and anyone can grow. Anyone can change. And anyone can walk the path of ascension to their ascension. Anyone can. Even the fallen beings. Even someone at the lowest level of consciousness, 0, level 1. Because at the 48th level, you can go down. You can choose to go down. And it just means it's just that longer of a journey upward, or harder of a journey upward. I don't want to, harder, easier, it's all relative. Yeah, resolving psychology. That's really my MO and why I'm here. This is like my interest, my focus. My biggest priority in my life is resolving psychology so that I can ascend. And it's been a journey and a process, and I'm very fascinated by psychology. I'm very fascinated by, I definitely was. Now it's not so much of a fascination. It's more of like, I'm fascinated because I feel like I'm actually making progress. I look back and I see the progress that I've made, but more it's like I just feel really motivated by the sense of connection that I feel again, that I feel like wasn't there, even though it was there the whole time. That's the thing. We're always connected, like always connected. You can't never not be connected. You can make yourself feel that you're not connected by your unresolved psychology in your separate selves. But really, you're always connected until you die. And then you go do something else. You go into either a different lifetime embodiment, or into the different realms. And because there's a certain level of flow that you can get of energy coming from the ascended realm. And when you squander that energy, and you do things that aren't in alignment with life, like are going against life, like when you harm people or you're acting out in negative emotions and all the blah, 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 it reduces the flow. And you're basically only getting enough for you to just stay alive. And so the more that you are in service to life, the more that you are in alignment with the flow of life, the universe, God, the more energy that you get. And there's more to it than that, but it's such a deep motivating part of my, it's just a deep motivation for me, motivator, to learn and to grow and to realize like my connection to the higher realms, like to the Ascended Masters, is like my deepest joy. For so long, I thought that feeling that I felt was an indicator that someone on planet Earth out there in the universe was my twin flame. I don't know where I got this from some new age shit probably. But I thought that this feeling that I have was an indication that it was because it was someone that I was connected to in the physical world that would manifest as my one true love. Who needs God when you have your one true love? That was like Princess Disney programming over here. Like I was a TV baby. My parents had very interesting, intense, chaotic psychology. And my babysitter and my attachment figure was the TV. And as a young child, and other people too. I'm making a joke, obviously, but Disney. Programming of the one Hollywood love. And so what a relief. What a relief to not have that programming anymore, and to feel like really whole and complete within myself because of this connection and this flow that I'm getting in with my co-creators, because I'm co-creating with them. I'm like, okay, what are we doing today? You know, like, what's the flow? You know, it's just joyous. I feel a lot of joy. So I hope this video was helpful. And I look forward to making more, and I'll talk to you soon.